The Bad Boys Pistons are something that the NBA has truly never seen before and will most likely never see again. Being the only team in NBA history post-NBA merger to be led to multiple championships by a player as small in stature as Isiah Thomas, who stood at 6'1", this team was definitely special. Now, the closest team to do that were the Miami Heat with 6'4", 6'11" wingspan, Dwayne Wade, and every other team's best player who won multiple titles within a 5-year stretch. The next smallest players to do so were Kobe Bryant at 6'6" and Michael Jordan. So we can see that this team was very interesting. Now, they also didn't have the biggest backing from the league, with many top players and media outlets calling out the Pistons for their style of play not being good for the league. As bad of a man as MJ was, where people make it out like he never complained, even he and the Bulls ran into multiple speed bumps, per se. 3 straight to be exact with the Pistons. Now, Detroit, they slayed the Celtics as well as the Showtime Lakers, yet they are forgotten in NBA history. So why? How in the hell did this formula work with the Bad Boys? How were they able to be dominant in an era where Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Michael Jordan were all in their primes? In this video, not only will we discuss the rise and fall of the Bad Boys Pistons, but also what their true legacy is and how they affected the game for years to come. Now, if you haven't yet, definitely click that subscribe button to enjoy more NBA videos just like this, because they come weekly. And if you enjoy this mini doc, then definitely go ahead and share that thing to anyone. Once you made it to the end, praise up to the Most High. Let's get it. The Detroit Pistons Bad Boys era wasn't until the late 80s, but before that we must document their acquisition of their leader and best player, Isiah Thomas, which kickstarted their rise to prominence. Now, the old saying goes, you are the identity of your 2 best players, and a lot, I repeat, a lot of that Pistons team DNA came from the persona and play style of Isiah Thomas. Now, before being drafted, Isiah had made his bones attending St. Joseph High School in Westchester, which was about 1.5 hours away from where he lived, leading his school to the state finals in his junior year, and really drew a lot of scouting. Now, Zeke was recruited to play college basketball at Indiana University, along with DePaul, where during his freshman year, he used to get into it with, or before his freshman year, he was getting into it with legendary and renowned head coach Bob Knight. Now, in that first year at Indiana University, which is where he chose to commit, he was even getting chewed out during practice for the Pan Am Games before that year, with Knight saying that you ought to go to DePaul, Isiah, because you sure as hell aren't going to be an Indiana player playing like that. Isiah was even kicked out of practice before by Knight, making a point that no matter how talented the player, that his coaching philosophy comes first. Now, during his freshman year, he led Indiana along with Mike Woodson to the Big Ten chip in the 1980 Sweet 16. Just a side note, shout out Mike Woodson. Man had 10,000 career points in the NBA. Not many head coaches have that kind of cachet. Now, in the 80-81 season, Isiah was given the keys to fully run the show on the floor and led the Hoosiers to the 1981 NCAA tournament and won the Most Outstanding Player Award. And with that storybook ending to his college career, he declared for the NBA draft. In the 1981 NBA draft, the Detroit Pistons drafted Isiah Thomas with the number 2 pick behind future teammate Mark Aguirre, who actually went to DePaul, the same school Isiah considered going to in his high school days. Now, in the first season with Isiah Thomas, the Pistons went 39-43, which is a considerable jump from the year before, with the number 2 pace in the league, having a number 6 offense in the league by points per game, and had acquired good young talent. They'd also picked up Kelly Tripucka, who was an all-star that year as well as Isiah, with their number 12 pick in the draft. And they acquired Bill Laimbeer from the Cleveland Cavaliers for the last 30 games of the season, where they went 16-14 upon his arrival, along with already having Vinnie Johnson. Now, they missed the playoffs this year and had shown a real problem with mediocre interior defense and a head coach that just wasn't getting the job done to lift them to playoff contention the first 2 years, along with those young players developing. We were seeing Isiah and Kelly making all-star appearances and having a respectable crowd, and this was seen as the framework being set up for Detroit's future success. In the 83-84 season, Detroit saw a 12-game improvement, finishing 1 game shy of 50 wins under the first year with head coach Chuck Daly. Isiah won the All-Star Game MVP this year, and the Pistons just look really good. Now, Detroit that year, they ranked 3rd in points per game, 5th in pace, and 1st in offensive rating, while finishing 16th in defensive rating, while leading the league in attendance, jumping up from 9th the year before. Now, just to show you how unused to winning the Detroit Pistons were before this era, that during their first playoff appearance in 7 years, Their home court had been previously scheduled to be rented out for a motocross event, and the final game was played in the Joe Louis Arena, which was so unfamiliar to them that the Pistons players had to be given written directions in order to get there. This was their first trip to the postseason under Isiah's tenure, and they were eliminated by the New York Knicks, which at the time went the full 5 games of the first round, who were getting absolutely murdered by Bernard King, who averaged 42.6 points per game on 60% from the floor against his matchup, Kelly Tripucka. And that was the 4th game in a row that King had dropped 40 plus against the Pistons, which was a record for a 5-game series. Now, Isiah Thomas had scored 35 points in that last game, as well as the Pistons' final 16 points in regulation, with the Pistons coming back from an 8-point deficit with 1:56 left. And he hit a clutch 3 with 23 seconds left on the clock to tie the game at 114-114. Now, the Knicks beat them in overtime of the final game of the series, with Bill Cartwright dropping 29 and their other center, Martell Webster, giving them 23, and it was clear to the Pistons they had interior defensive issues. Now, just to show you how much of a problem this was for Detroit in terms of defensive issues outside the guard position, Bernard King did all of that with a flu. Yes, as much as you hear about Jordan's flu and all the other guys who play with injuries, Bernard King did that with a flu. He nearly passed out during Game 5 from a lack of fluids and still managed to tear up the Pistons' wings and bigs. And when the bigs were able to combine for 50 plus, and that's just unexcusable, that's unacceptable, and they had to do something about this. In the 84-85 season, IT, Bill Laimbeer, and Chuck Daly led the Pistons to a 46-36 record, with Isiah Thomas and Bill Laimbeer making the All-Star team once again. They were number 1 in attendance, and the Pistons swept the New Jersey Nets 3-0 in the first round, and then faced off with the Boston Celtics in the semifinals. Now, the Pistons would become the first real threat in the East over these years, for the Celtics' dominance over the Eastern Conference, winning 4 conference championships from 1981 to 86. And the Celtics were fully loaded with McHale, Parrish, Ainge, Johnson, Cedric, Cornbread Maxwell, as well as the Beast himself, Larry Bird, and they handled the Pistons in 6. Now, Isiah Thomas played well. However, it was really clear that the Pistons needed another scoring threat at the guard position or on the wing to be dynamic against Boston. This is what led to them drafting Joe Dumars in the 1985 draft, which in my opinion was the steal of the draft. Dumars, after 4 years in college at McNeese State, he was a polished two-way player, coming in leaving the NCAA as the 11th leading scorer all time, and Michael Jordan even stated that Dumars was the toughest defender that he's ever faced. This was a great two-way pickup. The Pistons also acquired Rick Mahorn through a trade that season, which would be key for later title runs as well. The Pistons were number 1 in attendance once again, and they actually took a step back this year, losing to the Atlanta Hawks, led by the human highlight film himself, Dominique Wilkins, who averaged 34 points per game that series, dropping 50 in Game 2. And we see a trend here that it was abundantly clear that Detroit needed more physicality in their game, as through this series they were getting outran and outmuscled by the high-flying highlight film Atlanta Hawks. This is probably truly the final straw for the Pistons that they needed to change their identity. The Pistons traded their wing scorer Kelly Tripucka for All-Star Adrian Dantley, who would surely be a step up from Kelly, as Adrian was a better scorer, which Detroit thought would give them a go-to option on the wing, as well as the drafting of John Salley with the 11th pick and the drafting of the legendary Dennis Rodman with the 27th pick. This was the season where the squad truly became the Bad Boys, and they ranked number 1 in attendance once again, and their defensive rating jumped from 15th the year before to number 5 in the league during the 1986-87 season. They finished with the 52-30 record, where they swept the Bullets in the first round, and then beat the same Atlanta Hawks team that beat them before. They beat them 4-1, where the great finisher Dominique was not able to go off as easily with Detroit's new defensive weapons. Dennis Rodman was such a useful player, and was most of the time used as a tagger on the opposing team's best wing or forward player. Dominique went from averaging 34 points per game against that squad the year before to only averaging 22 once Rodman and Salley were on that team during the 87 playoffs. And Neek's field goal percentage also dipped to 38%, which just showed how well Detroit was able to take him out of his game. Now, Detroit really made their bones this year by their series performance against Boston. The Pistons, by the beginning of Game 5, were tied 2-2 with the defending champions, Celtics. They were basically just on the ropes, man. They had them boys whipped by a margin of 44 points over Games 3 and 4, and they looked primed to knock off the favorite Celtics. In Game 5, however, the Pistons would go on to lose one of the most traumatic losses of all time, where they were on the verge of winning this game. However, after a Celtics turnover, Zeke missed head coach Chuck Daly's signal for a timeout from the bench. He inbounded the ball. Larry Legend stole the inbound pass, and we all know what happens. He dishes to Dennis Johnson for the game-winning layup, and just like that, the Pistons were down 3-2 after having the chance to go up 3-2 and go back home to Detroit. Now, the Pistons won Game 6 and would end up losing Game 7 by 3 points to the Celtics. And the Celtics, they just showed true poise and execution of a champion, man. Isiah Thomas even stated at the time that he felt like this was his lowest moment in his pro career due to him being the Pistons' go-to guy and making that crucial mistake that cost him the game, or cost him the series, really, that would have gone back to Detroit. Even stating that he didn't know that how he was going to come out of that. Dennis Rodman even stated after Game 7 in the locker room that if Larry Bird were black, he would be considered just another good player, which was also co-signed by Isiah Thomas in a joking matter. Isiah even stated, in quote, "The big controversy isn't about my saying professional athletes are stereotyped. The controversy is that I said Larry Bird, if he was black, would be just another good guy. But I think we would all agree that the stereotypes do exist." He said again, Larry definitely had to work hard to where he is at to get where he is at. But so many times it's been said about black athletes that their talent is God-given or that it's natural ability. I had to work just as hard to get where I am. It's not God-given or instinctive. Basketball is a game where you do things over and over again. When someone makes a great play, it's not a matter of instinct, but how quickly you can recall. It was definitely one of the worst days of my life, Thomas said of last Saturday. I lost the game. I was accused of being a racist, and I'm a bad guy now. Which Larry Bird responded to by stating that if the comments didn't offend Bird himself, due to Isiah saying it was a joke, then why should others? Leave it at that. And Isiah even made it clear that, in quote, "I looked up the word racist. Has anyone in here taken the time to look it up? Racist is an ugly word. Let's try not to use it," end quote. Now, after all of that controversy and what if situations that occurred throughout that stretch, Detroit was definitely hungrier for that action for years to come. Now, they had made youthful mistakes, and it was clear they were on the verge of something special, with the ultimate goal of a championship, being able to have the champions down in a knockout position. They came back the next year motivated more than ever to knock off the Celtics. The Pistons in 1987-88 acquired center James Edwards and improved to a then franchise record 54 wins. They were number 6 in offensive rating, number 2 in defensive rating, and first in attendance once again. They beat the Bullets 3-2 in the first round before they had the first of many meetings with Michael Jordan and the Bulls. Now, Michael Jordan was the complete opposite of the Pistons in regard to how he was viewed around the league. Jordan was the league MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, and was definitely a beneficiary of a favorable whistle. Not too much, but definitely due to his positioning and the up-and-coming talent that he was in the league. Now, Jordan's dominance with a 61-point performance during the regular season Easter Sunday game that year had Chuck Daly and Isiah Thomas so pissed that they vowed never to allow Jordan to light him up like that again. This is how the oh-so-famous psychological ploy known as the Jordan Rules was born. The Pistons' game plan was to rough Jordan up and physically over-challenge him at the rim to set a statement, and physically, but more so mentally, throw him off. Now, in an interview with Sports Illustrated, Chuck Daly described the Jordan Rules as this: "If Michael was at the point, we forced him left and doubled him. If he was on the left wing, we immediately went to a double team from the top. If he was on the right wing, we went to a slow double team. He could hurt you from the hot dog stand, but we just wanted to vary the look. And if he was on the box, we doubled with a big guy. The other rule was, anytime he went by you, you had to nail him. If he was coming off a screen, nail him. We didn't want to be dirty. I know some people thought we were, but we just had to make contact and be very physical," end quote. Now, Joe Dumars in the ESPN 30 for 30 on the Bad Boys, he stated it best. It goes, the Da Vinci Code, the recipe to Coca-Cola, then the Jordan Rules. Now, this led to the Bulls getting handled in 5, with Jordan and the young Bulls squad motivated for years to come. Now, the Pistons in their next round would prove to be the passing of the guard that everyone saw coming from the year before, where Isiah and the Pistons handled Boston in 6 this year. And for those who want to say the Celtics were old, let me remind you that Larry Bird had a 50-40-90 season that year, averaging his highest point average for his career at 29.9. And yes, he only played 6 games the year after, but he bounced back, having a great season following that one as well. The rest of the Celtics were still producing at a high level, winning 57 games, where they had the number 1 offensive rating in the league in 1988, and were the number 1 in simple rating system. So give Detroit their credit. They moved on to face the Showtime Lakers, where Magic, Kareem, and the crew were ready, coming off of a championship year the year prior. Now, this was going to be Detroit's time to show that they deserve the respect of their peers and that they were at the top of the basketball world, following behind point guard maestro Isiah Thomas versus the Showtime Lakers and their point guard, Magic Johnson. Now, Isiah and Magic were great friends, and Magic defined them both as being devils in disguise because both were killers once that whistle blew and could cut your heart out and put it on the plate in front of you once activated in the game. Now, they used to kiss on the cheek prior to games. However, this kind of ceased once things got a little chippy in the finals. Magic definitely made sure to drop the shoulder on Zeke in the air, showing him what champions really do when it's go time, and that they definitely turn on that switch. Now, the Pistons were able to run the floor better than Showtime was, with a revolutionary small ball lineup, with a set of basically three great ball handlers in Dumars, Vinny the Microwave Johnson, Isiah Thomas, power forward and Bill Laimbeer, who could pop from three. Dennis Rodman was a highly mobile 3/big who could rebound and run the floor well. Detroit went up 3-2 in the finals, where Zeke was straight up. Look, man, go watch the game. It's on YouTube. I'll link it down below. Zeke was straight up cooking Magic Johnson. Oh my gosh. And the Lakers, they were basically, the Pistons were up, and this man was dropping 14 points in less than 5 minutes of the third. Then he sprained his ankle after Michael Cooper undercut him, and Detroit's championship season appeared to be down the drain. Now, he could have walked off the court and propped his ankle up on the media table and said straight up, "This is why," and nobody would have questioned it. But this dude played on a sprained ankle versus the best point guard that most people consider best point guard of all time, and gave him 25 in the third, hobbling up and down the court, which was a then finals record for points in the quarter. Now, IT dropped 43 this game and would have won if not for Bill Laimbeer getting a questionable, and I mean questionable, call against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, where Laimbeer so-called bumped Kareem's left shoulder on a sky hook, and Laimbeer basically fouled out on that play. Kareem went to the line and knocked down both free throws, which put the Lakers up by 1, and that was the ball game. Now, Isiah was a non-factor in Game 7, only able to play 28 minutes with his ankle completely stiff. Because let me tell you from personal experience, and anybody who's played at the rec, college, whatever, you can vouch for this too. Playing through the pain initially is always capable depending on your will. It's always easier than it is playing a day or two after the injury when your adrenaline isn't running anymore. That Game 7 with IT, there was no way his ankle would be good to go, and the Lakers slipped away with the NBA giving Detroit what I like to call the small town treatment. The small town treatment is basically when you play a team with a bigger fan base, or a much bigger fan base, and more star power than you, you cannot allow games to be close because they will use the refs to help sway the game. As a smaller market team, you must blow out your opponents to protect yourself from this type of stuff. As we saw, Detroit was the better team, having blown out the Lakers by 47 points in their 3 wins and only losing the last 2 games by a combined 4 points, with Isiah being injured for Games 6 and 7. Detroit would have, and I would argue should have, had their first championship season this year. In the 1988-89 season, Detroit looked like a team that had been robbed and determined to never let that happen again. Now, they traded the team's star wing, Adrian Dantley, aka the Teacher, who was known for taking forever to make a move on offense, and never took a shot that didn't have a high likelihood of going in. Now, they traded him for Isiah Thomas's longtime friend, Mark Aguirre. Mark had been a number 1 draft pick right before Isiah in the 81 draft, and the two were good friends, not to mention Aguirre had been a multiple-time All-Star, and he was the perfect fit for Detroit. He was more of the off-ball player, a better decision-maker, and a better defender than Adrian Dantley was. Now, the Pistons had been dominant this season, setting a team record with 63 wins, and swept, yes, you heard correctly, swept Larry Bird and the Celtics, as well as the Milwaukee Bucks, before facing off with Michael Jordan once again. Now, they had one of the greatest seasons and playoffs in NBA history, only losing twice the whole playoffs, and both times were to the Chicago Bulls. Now, more of the same from the year before occurred, where the Pistons just had to contain Jordan and the rest of the Bulls would follow because of their psychological hold on them. Now, once they reached the finals, they to once again face off with the Los Angeles Lakers. They looked even better and were able to sweep the Lakers, earning their first in franchise history NBA championship. While one could say that the Lakers were 11-0 that postseason, in that Byron Scott and Magic were injured. Magic played in 3 of the games in that finals. Yes, it was a few. But in the year prior, Lakers, they were already on the ropes against a Pistons team that had an injured Isiah Thomas in a closeout game, a cheap call that kept them alive in the elimination game, and the Pistons were playing with Adrian Dantley, who was almost like that era's better version of Carmelo Anthony. The Pistons, if healthy, would have beaten the Lakers that year regardless. Joe Dumars won his first and lone NBA Finals MVP, averaging 27.3 points per game and 6 assists per game, and the Pistons had done the impossible. That title run was important because they eliminated 3 of the top 5 players of that era on the same run, only losing 2 games. They defeated Verge Celtics, they defeated Jordan's Bulls, and they defeated Magic's Lakers. Now the Bad Boys would follow that year up with an impressive run once again, defeating the Pacers with a sweep, the Knicks in 5, and ran into some serious trouble with the Bulls and were pushed to 7 games. And when Scotty, after a migraine, didn't play much in the Game 7, they handled their business and moved on to the finals. When they faced off with the Clyde Drexler-led Portland Trailblazers in the finals, Isiah Thomas put those boys in a blender. Late in Game 1, he scored 16 of his 33 points in the final 7 minutes, and he finished that series with a 27.6 point per game average, 7 assists per game, and 5.2 rebounds per game, winning his first and lone Finals MVP. This 4-year stretch of dominance in the Eastern Conference never gave the Pistons the credit they deserve, however. I personally believe that there are multiple factors involved. For instance, in the 91 series where they finally lost to Chicago in a sweep before they lost Isiah Thomas and Bill Laimbeer, but primarily Isiah, they organized a walkout. Now, Detroit had never been exalted as champions the way the Lakers and the Celtics had, and they felt disrespected as they probably should have based on their accomplishments alone. That, along with the fact that Michael Jordan had taken over the city that Isiah was from, definitely aided to this event, along with the Pistons having a legacy to protect. They were known as the Bad Boys and were guaranteeingly about to lose to the Bulls, who had taken the torch from them, and in their eyes could not be seen showing defeat to these guys, who they had a psychological hold over for so many years. So quite a few of Detroit's players left the game early and walked right past Chicago's bench. And the worst of them all was Isiah Thomas, man, to be honest, because look, the way he was ducking his head, it looked like he knew what he was doing was not respectable, but he had a character to play and pride to protect. So, he and quite a few others did that. One of the few to congratulate the Bulls and Jordan was Joe Dumars and a few other players. And we can see that this event will go to haunt the Pistons' legacy for the rest of time. After losing, the Pistons were not shy, about saying how they felt. And with Detroit, they were seen as thugs after the incident with Jordan being involved in some of the criticism of the back-to-back champs, stating, in quote, "You see 2 different styles with us and them," Jordan said. The dirty play and the flagrant fouls and unsportsmanlike conduct, hopefully that will be eliminated from the game with them gone. We don't go out and try to hurt people and dirty up the game. You never lose respect for the champions, but I haven't agreed with the methods they've used. I think people are happy. The game will get back to a clean game. And Isiah Thomas, he shot back, in quote, "People will look back at this team and say we were one of the greatest teams to play basketball. We were great champions. He should be classier than to talk like that," end quote. I believe the Pistons have been overlooked due to the image that the league wants to promote, which is supremely clean. And they definitely want a certain play style to be glorified. Yet I believe that the Pistons did more good than harm, and it's not really close. They provided fans with an example that if you draft right and learn each year, that yes, your team can have a dynasty as well. You don't need a number 1 pick to turn things around, and the Pistons showed that. Just look at Michael Jordan, Dwayne Wade, and the Heat as prime examples of this. I've always said that Magic was the best point guard of all time by regular grading standards. But in my humble opinion, man, if I'm starting a squad and I need a point guard, I'll take Zeke any day of the week. There's a reason that not only Jordan, but that Magic Johnson, his own friend, were responsible for Isiah not making the 92 Olympic Dream Team. The Pistons, in my opinion, had one of the top 3 backcourts in NBA history, and I always struggle to think of a 1 and 2 combo I would take over them. Isiah Thomas was a dominant point guard who had excellent vision, could pound the rock and keep the ball in the string, defend with the best of them, could finish at the cup strong, and acrobatically could shoot it with the best of them, and had that clutch factor that you just can't teach, along with probably the biggest dog inside of a little body in NBA history. Joe Dumars was an excellent 2-way guard who could keep a player like Michael Jordan frustrated and give you a cool 20 on the other side. Dennis Rodman could guard almost any position on the court in lockdown fashion during his Bad Boys days and could run the floor with really well with the 2 guards. Bill Laimbeer could shoot the 3 and had a good back-to-the-basket game, and James Edwards, along with John Salley and Rick Mahorn, played excellent off-ball rolling, rebounding, and defensive roles. Vinny the Microwave Johnson was always a heat check kind of guy, and Mark Aguirre gave good, efficient scoring on the wing and spacing on the floor, and his moving off-ball was well along with his defense. Now this, along with Chuck Daly's ability to coach that group of guys with enough grit and offensive know-how to max efficiency, the Pistons at their prime, I'll give them a shot versus any team in NBA history, and are, in my opinion, a top 5 dynasty of all time. Outside of a bogus, and please go watch it, it's on YouTube, a bogus Kareem foul, they would have been the only dynasty of the 80s to three-peat. Detroit also bettered the league in ways that we forget to mention, like how they were the first team to have their own plane, which did raise the standards around the league. They were the first team to upgrade their hotels, which forced the other teams to step their game up. The Pistons got better year by year incrementally and did not buy all their players, showing that it can be done without getting free agents. Joe Dumars went on to become president of basketball operations for the Pistons and helped create a team that had made the Eastern Conference Finals 6 straight times under his reign, and then earned the well-fought-for title in 2004 when they beat the Lakers again. Dennis Rodman went on to go to the Spurs for a brief stint, and then the Chicago Bulls, where he earned 3 more titles alongside the guys he once despised. Now, Bill Laimbeer was one of the first pick and pop guys that could hit from long range, as well as a big, draining over 200 threes for his career, while also helping create an interesting Bill Laimbeer combat basketball video game, while leading the Detroit Shock, a WNBA team, to 3 titles as head coach and general manager. Isiah Thomas, after playing, became the owner of the Continental Basketball Association, CBA, which was essentially going to be a developmental league. While there, he launched new websites that allowed fans to watch live game webcasts, use live shot charts, chat with players, and etc. He knew that the internet was going to be an integral part of the CBA's game plan and launched a partnership with SeasonTicket.com to bring personalized video highlights and scores, as well as being a portal for All-Star League voting. He knew that streaming video would be the future of news and entertainment, and in 2001, the league was forced into bankruptcy shortly after NBA Commissioner David Stern decided to create a rival league known as the NBA D-League to replace the CBA. The truth about the Bad Boys is that the league did not know how to handle them. They were a team that was built very similar into how Isiah Thomas's background built him. They were skillful, prideful, scrappy, upbeat, and they had their own style. The league wasn't trying to market that. They wanted to market Smiling Magic and Larry Bird, not the Bad Boys Pistons. All right, the Bad Boys would simply like to be acknowledged throughout NBA history as one of the greats and not talked about in such a disgusting manner. However, I have to say this, that they made their bones and they must live with the consequences. Once you take on that villain role, it will be very tough to gain the support of the mainstream once again. The writers of NBA history love skipping from Magic and Bird straight to Jordan. However, we cannot do that no matter how dirty you may think the Pistons were. Other teams were whacking them right back, and the Pistons nearly did something that neither the 80s Celtics nor Showtime Lakers were able to do, which is three-peat, and they simply want some respect on their name. I'd like to thank everybody for their support for the channel. I'm currently doing research for other projects coming in the future. If you like this video, definitely subscribe. If that's not, if not, that's cool too. God bless. But definitely make sure to check out other NBA video essays on my channel. You already know it's never be mad at me, but be mad at yourself for being an underachiever. Play the outro.